You think you're being careful, responsible, disciplined, maybe even noble. After all, perfectionism is often praised. Society calls it a virtue, proof of standards, of commitment, of self-respect. But what if it's not? What if beneath the shine of your pursuit lies not strength, but fear? According to Carl Gustav Jung, perfectionism is rarely about excellence. It's a refined disguise, one that conceals not flaws but potential. A subtle strategy we use not to face failure but to avoid success. Yes, success. Because true success carries weight. Not just applause or rewards, but responsibility, accountability, growth, and for many that's more terrifying than falling short. Jung believed the psyche wears masks, what he called the persona. These masks aren't deceptions but protections. We wear them to survive, to be accepted, to stay safe. But sometimes, the mask becomes so polished, so convincing, we forget it's not who we truly are. Perfectionism is one of those masks. You might dream of writing a book, launching a business, speaking your truth, but instead you wait. You plan, you tweak, you prepare, yet you never begin. You tell yourself it's not ready yet, the idea needs refining. The timing isn't right, but weeks pass, then months, then years, and nothing moves. The world. You look busy, focused, dedicated, but internally you're frozen, caught in what Jung might call elegant paralysis, a beautifully constructed stall, a strategy not for creation but for avoidance. Why? Because starting means facing a question far more uncomfortable than what if I fail. It's this: what if I'm capable of far more than I've allowed myself to be? That question haunts, because it brings with it a flood of realizations: the time you've lost, the opportunities missed, the responsibilities you've postponed. Jung said the unconscious stores not just shame or trauma but unlived greatness. He called this the shadow. And for many perfectionists, the shadow doesn't contain weakness, it contains power. Power that feels overwhelming. Power that demands you change. Power that could transform your life, but only if you step forward. Only if you stay where it's safe, behind the mask. In motion but not moving. Admired but not fulfilled. Because saying I haven't started because I want it perfect earns respect, but saying I haven't started because I'm afraid of my potential feels unbearable. Perfectionism then becomes the perfect excuse not to fail, but not to fly. We often think that failure is our biggest fear, that the reason we hesitate, stall, or over-prepare is because we're afraid to fall short. But Jung offers another possibility. Maybe we're not afraid of failing. Maybe we're afraid of succeeding because success forces confrontation. It shines a light on who we could have been all along. It exposes the years we've spent hiding behind excuses, behind not ready, behind perfection. And that can hurt more than falling ever could. Jung described the shadow as the part of ourselves we don't want to see, qualities we reject, talents we suppress, impulses we fear to express. But contrary to what many think, the shadow isn't only made of darkness. It often contains our greatness. It holds the leadership we've buried, the courage we've denied, the creativity we've labeled as too much. Why? Because living out those qualities means change, big change, and change is terrifying. We are taught to fit in, to be agreeable, to not stand out too much. And so we create a polished version of ourselves, a persona that earns approval, applause, and acceptance. But the more we identify with this mask, the harder it becomes to access what lies behind it. The more we perfect the image, the more disconnected we become from the truth. Think of someone who's been almost ready to start their own business. For years, they study, plan, revise, take courses. Everything looks logical, admirable, even. But beneath the productivity lies a secret. They're terrified of who they'd have to become if it actually worked. Because success brings more than results. It brings responsibility, exposure, new expectations, new eyes watching. What if you can't sustain it? What if people expect more next time? What if you become someone others envy, or worse, someone they misunderstand? Perfectionism becomes the shield, not from failure, but from being seen. That gives you something to point to. I'm not done yet, it's not good enough, I'm just refining. But Jung saw through this. He understood that when action is postponed for too long, the energy meant for creation turns inward. It becomes frustration, anxiety, restlessness, a kind of spiritual suffocation. We convince ourselves we're being careful, but what we're really doing is hiding. And the longer we wait, the heavier it becomes, because The truth is, those who sense their potential but never step into it live in a quiet torment. They know, deep down, they always know that it sounds strange, doesn't it? The idea that someone might fear their own power. After all, who wouldn't want to be strong, to create, to lead, to change their life? But Carl Jung urged us to look deeper beyond the surface of ambition and into the shadow where our real motives hide. And what he found was this: the fear of one's own power is one of the most paralyzing forces in the human psyche, because real power doesn't just offer freedom, it demands responsibility. It calls you to act, to stop delaying, to use your voice, and to finally become the person you were always meant to be. And that is terrifying. Why? Because stepping into your strength comes at a cost. You have to admit how long you've been holding back. You have to face the time you've lost. You have to let go of the comforting illusion that you weren't ready. Jung called this confrontation the beginning of individuation, the path toward becoming your most complete self. But it's not a peaceful path. It demands that you abandon old identities, step out of safety, and walk into the unknown, both within and around you. That's why many choose to stay small, because small feels safe. Small doesn't attract too much attention. Small doesn't make others uncomfortable. Small doesn't threaten the status quo, and in truth, society often rewards small, even while claiming to admire greatness. It quietly punishes those who truly shine. The more you stand out, the more exposed you become, the more visible your achievements, the more pressure you face. Admiration often walks hand in hand with envy, expectations, and judgment. So instead of growing, many shrink. But shrinking comes at a price. Jung observed that when our power stays buried in the shadow, it doesn't disappear. It festers. It creates invisible sabotage. You cancel meetings. You avoid opportunities. You start things but never finish. Not because you're lazy or incapable, but because somewhere inside, you're terrified of what it means to follow through. Because if you do, if you actually rise, then you must maintain it. And you must own it. And you can no longer pretend you didn't know what you were capable of. That's why perfectionism is so seductive. It's the perfect hiding place. You're not giving up, you're working on it. You're not avoiding, you're waiting for the right moment. You're not hiding, you're polishing. But beneath all that polish is something primal, the fear of having to become the person you were born to be. From the outside, perfectionism looks like discipline, focus, high standards. But inside, it often feels like exhaustion, pressure, quiet despair. Carl Jung didn't see perfectionism as a flaw in morality or a personality quirk. He saw it as a psychological defense, a protective wall built by the ego to avoid confronting what feels too big, too unknown, or too powerful within. But here's the cost. While that wall keeps discomfort out, it also keeps your potential locked in. The result: a life spent rehearsing but never performing, planning but never leaping, always almost ready, but never truly living. Jung believed that healing didn't come from destroying perfectionism or forcing yourself to just do it. It came from integration, from bringing the hidden parts of yourself into conscious awareness and transforming them. Perfectionism, in this light, isn't something to be hated. It's a signal, a signpost, a message from the unconscious that there is something in you trying to emerge but being held back. So how do we begin? Start with honesty. Not with others, but with yourself. Ask, what am I really afraid will happen if I act before I feel ready? What truth about myself am I avoiding by staying perfect? Then take small, imperfect steps. Write the messy draft. Launch the half-formed idea. Have the uncomfortable conversation. Do the thing, not when it's perfect, but when it's real. Jung taught that transformation begins not in the mind, but in action. Psychic energy must flow. If it gets stuck, it turns into anxiety, self-criticism, and even despair. But the moment you active and clumsily you start to reclaim that energy, you begin to loosen the grip of the mask. You start to hear your own voice again. Perfectionism says, not yet. Courage says, now just as you are. Remember, your shadow does not exist to shame you. It exists to complete you. Your creativity, your intuition, your boldness, your leadership, they were never gone, just buried. And the key to reclaiming them is not perfection, it's permission. Permission to stumble, permission to begin before you're ready, permission to be fully, gloriously human. Because in the end, your power doesn't lie in being flawless, it lies in being true.